The first thing I noticed in the courtroom was how ordinary everything looked: fluorescent lights, beige walls, a clock that ticked louder than it should have. 10 years of my life had somehow been compressed into a stack of documents on a long table, and nobody in that room looked like they understood what those 10 years felt like. My parents sat across the aisle. They looked older, but not tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from raising a child. The kind that settles in your bones after years of school mornings and fevers and homework fights, and the quiet fear that you might be doing everything wrong. They had a lawyer speaking for them. He used careful language. He said things like family separation and unlawful interference. He spoke about how a child had been kept away from her biological family for nearly a decade, how attempts at reconciliation had been blocked. Every sentence sounded polished, reasonable, like he was talking about someone else. The judge listened without interrupting. His face stayed neutral, the way professionals learn to do. Then the lawyer finished with a sentence that seemed rehearsed. "We believe the child deserves to know her real family." The room went quiet. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't trust my face if I did. Instead, I let my mind drift somewhere else for a moment. 10 years back, a knock at my door just before sunrise. I remember opening it half asleep, expecting maybe a neighbor or a delivery mistake. Instead, there was a baby carrier sitting on the mat, a thin blanket tucked around a newborn, and a note. 3 lines. "I can't do this right now. Mom and Dad said you'd understand. Please take care of her." My sister's handwriting. The baby was crying so hard her face had turned red. I stood there for a long time before I picked her up. Not because I didn't care, because I knew the moment I did, my life would split into a before and an after. My parents answered the phone that morning like I had called about a flat tire. "Well," my mother said, calm and practical, "your sister clearly isn't ready." My father added the part that stuck with me: "She's your burden now." Burden. The word hung in the air like something already decided. I asked what we were supposed to do. There was a pause. "You're the stable one," my mother said. No one offered to come help. No one asked what I needed. The baby cried through that entire call. The first months were mechanical. Formula schedules taped to the fridge. Pediatric appointments I Googled how to prepare for, learning how to sleep in fragments. I told myself it was temporary. Someone would come back. My sister would figure things out. Or my parents would step in. They didn't. When I called, conversations stayed short. "How is she?" they'd ask. "Fine," I'd say. "Good." That was usually where it ended. Years passed in small moments. First steps on a living room carpet I never replaced, because she loved sitting there with crayons. The first time she got sick and fell asleep on my shoulder in the emergency room waiting area. The way she started calling me Ari instead of Aunt because toddlers simplify everything. I stopped correcting her, not because I wanted the title, because correcting her felt pointless. The legal notice arrived when she was 9. Certified mail. A thick envelope. Inside were documents claiming I had deliberately isolated her from her biological family, that I had prevented visitation, that I had obstructed attempts at reunification. Reading it felt surreal, like someone had written a story about my life without ever stepping inside it. Back in the courtroom, their lawyer finished his argument. The judge turned slightly toward me. "Do you have documentation?" I nodded. The folder sat in front of me. It wasn't dramatic, just a plain, sealed envelope, thicker than it looked. I stood, walked it to the clerk, and watched it pass to the judge. He opened it slowly. Inside were 10 years of quiet evidence. Certified letters I had mailed to my sister, asking if she wanted to discuss guardianship. Every single one returned unopened. Emails to my parents inviting them to birthdays. No replies. Text messages from my mother. "Handle it. She's your responsibility now." Another from my father 2 years later: "Don't involve us unless it's an emergency." School enrollment forms listing emergency contacts. Only my name. Doctor's records. Only my name. Page after page of attempts to involve them. Page after page of silence. The judge read for a long time. The room felt smaller with every minute. At one point he stopped and looked up. Not at me. At my parents. Then he looked back down and continued reading. When he finished, he closed the folder and rested his hands on it. He turned toward me. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the room easily. Do they even know what you have? For the first time since the hearing started, everyone looked at me. My parents, their lawyer, the court clerk. I nodded. Yes, I didn't add anything else. The judge leaned back slightly, studying the documents again. Something in the room had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No one gasped. No one raised their voice. But the story their lawyer told no longer fit the evidence sitting on the judge's desk. The judge looked back at me. You've been the primary caregiver for 10 years. It wasn't a question. Yes, and these records show repeated attempts to involve the biological family. Yes. He paused. Then he looked toward my parents again. For the first time since the hearing started, they looked unsure, not angry, just unsure. The judge turned back to me. You may speak. I took a breath. I wasn't preparing to attack anyone. There was no point. The past 10 years didn't need embellishment. They were already heavy enough. I didn't keep anyone away, I said quietly. My voice sounded steadier than I expected. I spent 10 years trying to bring them in. I glanced briefly at the folder. They just never came. The courtroom stayed silent. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind where something finally becomes clear. And for the first time since that morning 10 years ago, the story of what actually happened wasn't being told behind closed doors. It was sitting in the open, where it belonged.